Well, let's go ahead and get started then. So we're recording, so that makes it official. Thank you everybody for joining our webinar today. I know webinars are everywhere these days, and we really do appreciate you taking time out of your day to attend here in person. We promise to make it worth your while. We promise to make it informative and maybe even entertaining. So thanks again for joining. Just some housekeeping. We're using the GoToWebinar platform, so those that haven't used it, because it is a large group, we're going to use the question and the chat feature in the webinar. So go ahead and type your questions out there. Feel free to answer them. We'll be able to share the answers and share the questions that way. Otherwise, we've got an hour that'll hopefully go by quickly. We're going to go through some supply chain where Kinaxis plugs into that, and then a live demo, which is probably what everybody's here to see, I'm sure. So that, Ken, let's go ahead and get started. So thanks everybody for joining. Again, my name is Mike Raftery. I'm a partner here at SCM Connections. We are a supply chain transformation firm, and today's highlight that we're going to demonstrate is our friends at Kinaxis and how their platform really does enable this next generation supply chain planning capability, scenario planning, what if planning, and really getting into the visibility of your data in your supply chain when you find that Excel or maybe a lesser planning application can't meet the needs. One of the reasons why we're real excited about this app is because we're a process-focused firm, and these are process-focused tools. This is not an application that you need to go and figure out how to use. It will flow very nicely with your supply chain, and we'll show you how to. One example about how that would work today. So we appreciate that. Appreciate our friends at Kinaxis and the partnership that we have with them. So just a quick intro of who we are. Like I said before, my name is Mike Raftery. I'm a partner here at SCM Connections. I've been in the advanced supply chain planning space for about almost 20 years now, and kind of mostly in network simulation and network optimization, mostly in consumer products and life sciences until joining SCM Connections in 2013, and been a part of that firm and as we've grown our customer base along the way. Based here in Chicago, and happy to be here with you guys. So Dom, you're next on the chart. You want to go next?
Great, thanks very much, Mike. Hi, everyone. My name is Dominic Thomas, and I lead the business consulting team for Kinaxis. I'm thrilled to be here today, partnering with SCM Connections to do this webinar. My role at Kinaxis is to lead our business consulting team, and so it's my team that's responsible for working with our prospects, our customers, our partners in showcasing our supply chain technology RapidResponse, which you'll be seeing today. So again, looking forward to a great webinar, looking forward to your questions, and I'm really honored to be here today co-presenting. Over to you, Cameron.
And welcome everyone. I am Cameron Gerhardt, a senior consultant here at SCM Connections. Been with the company for a little over 2 years now, and in those couple of years, I've mostly been focused on projects that involve implementing S&OP processes and the tools that are needed to support them, specifically doing some supply optimization, planning engines, and things like that. So excited to be here today and take you through the demo later.
Well, thanks, everybody. All right, well, let's get into it here. I believe go first. So, one thing, as I mentioned before, being in this industry for about 20 years or so, there has never been a time in maybe the past 2-3 years where supply chain has taken such a front and center place at the table. I mean, it's not just becoming an extension of procurement, it's now a critical point for meeting organizations' targets, whether that be revenue, customer service, or delivery. So if you want to go to the next one here, I mean, this all happened even before the war in Ukraine that I put this slide together, and you can see just the amount of churn, the amount of variability that's just inherent in supply chains today. This kind of goes from a couple of different things. I think one, COVID really stressed a lot of supply chains out. And I say that in a way that, in the past, 15, 20 years, supply chains have really focused on efficiency, where, signing long-term agreements, doing sole suppliers, really getting lean on inventory was a priority because of the stability in the environment. Well, now, everybody has seen everything from, the Suez Canal getting closed, right, to trade wars, to COVID ports shutting down, to labor shortfalls. I mean, it goes on and on and on. And now we're dealing with, food supply chain issues out over in Ukraine. I think it's safe to say that redundancy is replacing efficiency as the main goal of supply chain planning. And what that means is an investment in tools and capabilities that will allow supply chains to be agile. I know that's sort of a buzzword, especially from a consulting firm, but really I'm meaning it into the ability to change direction quickly and effectively compared to sort of an entrenched, rigid supply chain with not many options. Really, the supply chains that will succeed in the future are the ones that are going to be able to react quickly with confidence and supply their customers no matter what comes at them. So a couple of trends that we're seeing to help that, one is visibility. People really need to get their eyes and ears around the information that they have. You can't afford, a weekly report or even in some cases an overnight report to be a limiting factor into understanding the issues, understanding the constraints in your supply chain. So having a single view of the truth is something that a lot of our customers come to as a first requirement. The agility and resilience I talked about, that's really one that I think comes very closely behind visibility. The ability to evaluate and make a decision quickly. What I call that is reducing the decision cycles. The number of decisions you can evaluate in a day means you're going to make that decision better. You're going to make it faster with more confidence. And tools like the one that we're showing this afternoon with our friends at Kinaxis are the type of tool, and specifically one that will help you evaluate and adjust, understanding all the ramifications. You're not doing this stuff on gut feel or, we always do it this way. You're really acting with confidence, and that's what's needed in today's supply chain. And finally, sustainability, it kind of goes into it with resilience, but being able to not just have one really cheap offshore supplier, but having multiple options and network of partners is key for sustaining supply chains and sustaining supply to customers. What that means is that supply chains are becoming more complex. So you end up with a lot more permutations to evaluate, a lot more sourcing options, cost trade-offs, and just managing that complexity requires a different set of tools. And we're seeing an awful lot of investment in S&OP tools to help understand those permutations and those variables in the modern supply chain. So again, you can see all of these things come back with, different startups, different technology pressures. Where are people spending? Where are they investing? Now, this is all, either Gartner-based. There's some stuff here from different media outlets. But what we are seeing at SCM Connections firsthand is companies moving into areas they never thought they would be. Specifically, how to manage shortfalls. So you have an entire generation of planning that we're used to demand-driven supply chains, where the assumption being we can find any raw materials, labor, and transportation we could possibly need given enough lead time. We just need the demand to drive the bus. Now what we're seeing is a shift where supply constraints, whether that's a raw material constraint because of environmental or business trends, you're seeing labor constraints, being we can't get a third shift in maybe a rural plant or something like that, or just machine capabilities. So all of those areas are now constraining, and again, these are broad strokes, but constraining supply chains in a way they're not used to being constrained, where even if you know what the demand is months in advance, you can't actually create the supply to meet all of it. So that means trade-offs. That means trade-offs in what are you going to make, how are you going to make it, what are we going to do to maximize profitability, to meet the majority of our customers' demands, or even our most important customers' demands in some cases. All of those require a flip from how do we maximize demand to how do we maximize the limited constraints that we have. And we think, and this is just a sampling of research, we think that trend is going to continue into the future because of labor pool dynamics, environmental constraints, and global dynamics. There's a lot that goes into that bucket. But all of those factors combined mean that it's going to be a lot harder to manage supply chains in the future. This is not something you can do in an Excel lookup, no matter how good your Excel is, because it's not agile enough. You can't rebuild your entire modeling solution with every variable that comes at you. Business moves too fast, and your customers demand a more resilient, a more agile approach than that. So we are seeing a lot of clients invest in tools to help them meet that need, and we're going to show you what that looks like in practical terms today. We talked a lot about harmonization. That's another one that we want to talk about, is being able to see all of your data in one place, not coming into a meeting saying, you know, your spreadsheet doesn't match my Excel file, or whatever, right? You don't spend time arguing about data, you spend time solving a problem. And while that sounds kind of obvious, I think everybody's nodding their head, realizing that anytime you go into an S&OP meeting with a spreadsheet labeled like version 15, you know, you're bound to lose that meeting. That is going to be a lot of debate in terms of what the one version of the truth is. So we're seeing that. We're seeing a lot of people, really the need for good supply chain professionals that understand and can drive technology, specifically data scientists. That's something that people are investing in quite a bit. And then in sourcing. And when you invest in sourcing, you need to manage those sources, and that requires tools to do that effectively. So we're seeing an acceleration in investment at all levels, in all industries, and I'm sure that's going to continue, at least for the near future, as everybody adjusts to the supply-constrained world that we're living in these days. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Dom. Dom, you want to take it away for how you guys fit into these challenges we're seeing?
Perfect. Thanks very much, Mike. So what I thought I would do is, in advance of the demonstration that Cameron's going to do, just share with you some of the learnings that I've been able to get over the last couple of years. Like many of you, I've been in supply chain for a long time. And I think the last couple of years specifically, as they've related to supply chain disruption and COVID, has really caused supply chain professionals to re-examine some of the beliefs that they had. And Mike alluded to a lot of these already. And so these are learnings that I've gained from speaking with our customers, our prospects, to really get some insight into what they're thinking about in terms of their next generation of supply chain technology that they're looking to put in. So in short, Cameron, if you could, yeah, there we go. There's a new thesis, I think, that's forming across industry and across different organizations. And specifically because COVID has shone a light on some of the practices that we sort of took for granted in the past, which we now understand cannot keep up with the demands of the supply chain going forward. And there are several of these that I could rattle off, but I'm just going to boil it down to three of the most important ones. So the first one that I've learned in speaking with supply chain professionals is that you can't take the planner away from the plan. You know, in the past, we've thought about automating lots of things and having that easy button type approach where you click a button and it solves the entire plan end to end and you're ready to put that in place. I think COVID has kind of taught us that that is not really a reasonable option. You know, there are lots of things that the machine can do, lots of calculations, lot of automation that can be brought into the process, but ultimately the human being understands the context and can relate to the decision being made. And so you have to have the person in the middle of that planning process. The second one is that there is a difference between supply chain visibility and supply chain transparency. So visibility from our perspective is interesting. You know, you know that you've got a stock out, or you know that you've got an overstock in inventory. The distinction that we make from a Kinaxis standpoint is transparency tells you what the impact of that event is. So having that stock out on some components somewhere in your bill of materials what does that mean in terms of the orders that you can promise your customers or the changes to those dates that you've promised to your customers? And so it's a subtle difference, but really when we talk about rapid response and the next generation of planning, we talk about transparency as one of those key fundamental capabilities. And then the last one is around agility, and Mike mentioned this already. You know, I think I've been in supply chain now for about 25 years, and all through my career, we've been sort of obsessed with this pursuit of accuracy in our supply chain, right? Whether it be forecast accuracy, planning the perfect order, all of those types of goals that supply chain organizations have as part of their everyday planning lives. Well, often that accuracy has been at the expense of agility. You know, the ability to understand when things change, how quickly can you react to that change and understand what the implications of that change are. And I think the next generation of supply chain, just based on talking to lots of practitioners over the last couple of years, have to sort of balance out that agility alongside accuracy to ultimately give you the plan you want. So Cameron, if you could move to the next slide. So, you know, this is no longer a nice to have capability. It's really fundamental table stakes, right? There are lots of various things going on, like Mike mentioned earlier, sustainability goals that now need to be incorporated into the plan, cash preservation, especially through the pandemic. You know, finance organizations within companies were looking at the supply chain and saying, do we really need to spend all of this money in such uncertain times? Can we hold back in terms of replenishing to policies that might have been put in place prior to COVID, mergers and acquisitions, and that quest for talent as well. So to be able to attract and retain the top talent out there, you need your next generation system to be intuitive. It can't be the super complex spreadsheet based process that requires a lot of manual intervention and multiple versions of the truth and that sort of thing. People are expecting their business systems to behave very similarly to how we are all used to in our personal lives. So these are all some of the considerations that are foremost in the minds of a lot of next generation thinkers around supply chain. So if you could move to the next slide, Cameron. So when we talk about agility, at least from a Kinaxis perspective, one of those fundamental building blocks of agility is the ability to do scenario planning, right? And everybody out there thinks about scenario planning a little bit differently. But essentially, from a Kinaxis rapid response perspective, the way the technology is built, it's there to help a planner ask any question of the platform and get an answer in real time. And so central to that is the planning brain, which is always on. It's always calculating 24/7. There is no concept of I'm going to run a batch process now in Kinaxis. It's just always on, and it's always balancing supply and demand. Scenarios are ways of introducing change to the plan. And so you'll see as part of the demonstration, Cameron's going to create scenarios on the fly. And essentially, these are identical replicas of the live plan, which you can then add any change you want to it and see what the impact is. And because it's always on and it's in real time, you get your answer right away. So the way scenarios work is that they can form a historian view, whereby you can go back in time and say, well, what did my supply chain look like back in February or back in March, and know what your sales order book was, what your receipts or your purchase orders were with your vendors, what the bill of material looked like. All of that is preserved with 100% fidelity. And so that gives you that historian where you can roll back the clock and see exactly what you were thinking at the time you might have made a decision in the past. The other aspect of scenarios is to do you can ask RapidResponse any question. So what if demand changes by 30% next quarter? What does that do to my supply chain? What if we use a co-packer? What if we change lead times with our suppliers? All of those types of things you'll get an answer to immediately. And that's really the power and the agility that supply chain planning organizations are going to need for the next generation. Cameron, if you could move to the next slide. So, and you can just go ahead and build it out. So in most, when you think about sales and operations planning versus sales and operations execution, in many systems, they tend to be separate. And, you would have a module to do sales and operations planning, a module to do your operational plan. And generally, they would not necessarily be built on the same information. With Kinaxis, we talk about something called concurrent planning. And concurrent planning is really where the demand, the supply, the distribution, the constraints, the purchasing, all of that happens in one place at one time. And so what that enables you to do is at the sales and operations planning level, if you were creating a scenario to evaluate something, all of the rules of the supply chain, so the lead times, the constraints, the capacities, the expiry rules around inventory, all of that is considered in planning your S&OP and vice versa. So it gives you a high fidelity plan that's actually actionable. And so just to set up the demonstration that Cameron's going to walk through, we'll start off a very typical sort of demand review type scenario where you could imagine sitting around a table and somebody says, well, what if demand changes by X% next month or next quarter? We'll go through an example of creating a scenario, modeling that change, seeing what the impact of that change is on the supply chain. So we'll use a metric called demand at risk to identify that. We'll go into a root cause analysis, evaluate multiple scenarios to try and rectify that problem, and then approve a scenario to put into production. So with that, Cameron, I'll hand it over to you.
Perfect. Thank you, Dom. All right. Okay, good to go. All right, so let's switch over to RapidResponse. So I am here in the web platform today to perform this demo, and just want to do a quick overview of what the platform looks like. So over here on the left, I have some different controls so I can access my different resources, such as other workbooks or dashboards, etc. I'll walk you through a few different resources today throughout the demo. Can also view all of my scenarios over here in a tree structure. So Dom highlighted those already, but I'll continue to emphasize the importance of those and how they're used to model changes in the system. However, today I'm going to start over here with my icons up in the top. So you can see I'm logged in right now. I just have up an executive dashboard. So this could just be something when you come to the tool, this is what you're seeing for a very high level view. And then I have a few things over here. So today I'm going to start in the notification center. So it looks like I've gotten a notification that I have been included in a collaboration. I want to take a look at this. So I click into it and I'm going to go ahead and view this collaboration.
And all this is driven on the web. I think that's something to point out too. I mean, we talk about a lot of systems have different platforms, but this is built on a browser. So it's accessible to anybody and a really light touch, light IT footprint there.
Exactly. All right, so it looks like I have a message as the Rapid Start user saying that a customer has reached out. This is coming from someone on the sales team and they're interested in purchasing 20,000 units of beef ramen noodles. We're a CPG company making frozen foods, sauces, things of that nature. And we're looking to increase demand for our beef ramen noodles in October through December of 2021. They let me know the exact, the exact product that is. And they're asking if I can model and run it through the system to ensure that we don't have any components shortages and we can meet all of our demand orders on time. And lastly, they left a note to say that, if I get stuck throughout this process as a planner, there's something called a task flow that I can reference. They let me know where to start in the task flow and where certain steps that I can skip. So just to show you that really quick, right up here, if I just click on this task flow, this is a really neat feature of RapidResponse. This is basically a built-in process, guided process steps. So these are completely configurable to your business and can walk planners through common scenarios that they'll be modeling. For example, today, a demand increase. So I can click on any of these steps and be told, here's what you would do in the consensus demand planning. These are the changes you should input, and here's the result that you'll be looking for. Another great feature is the fact that right here you can see I have direct links to each and every one of the resources that I'll need to complete this task. So I'll be coming back to this task flow throughout the demo just to access my resources, but this is a very useful feature that's built in.
So this is where you would model your own workflow process.
Yep.
Right, whether that's monthly, weekly.
Exactly. So back in my collaboration, I know what I'm supposed to do now. If I go over here, I can see that the sales team already created a scenario that they want me to start based off of. And then it looks like they've also posted some activity in here. So they took a screenshot of, it appears to be the consensus demand planning workbook, and said, go ahead and input this demand spike into the adjustments, again, for that product L1500. So I'm just going to click on this link right here, and it'll take me directly into the workbook I need. I'm also immediately in that scenario that I'm using that the sales team created. And so the consensus demand planning workbook, this is just a high level view and both a table and chart of the various elements of the consensus demand plan. So we've got our finance, marketing, sales forecasts, this unconstrained demand plan line right here. That's our current operating plan. And then if I scroll down as well, there's this element that Dom mentioned, the demand plan at risk, which will be a metric for our performance. So it looks like I am filtered on the correct product group, L1500, which is our beef ramen noodles. So what I'm going to do is I want to make a new scenario. I don't want to touch the one that the sales team created. That's our current operating plan, and I'm going to want to compare back to that at the end. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new scenario.
This is something a normal user would be able to do. Right?
Yep, exactly. So I'll create a forecast adjustment. Right now, this is just going to be private to me. Eventually, I can share it with other users and allow them to either view or modify it. And I based it on the scenario that the sales team gave me. So now I'm in my own private scenario. I'm just going to go into this adjustments line and add 20,000 units in each period for October through December. And before I click save, just want to come back to the powerful concurrent planning. So again, like Dom said, it's immediately going to balance your supply and demand and give you immediate results. So let's see, I'm gonna click save right here. And within seconds, it's recalculated my entire plan. It's gone through the components and materials that I have available, determined if I have any shortages, and we can see that my unconstrained demand plan increased by those 20,000 units, but also we now have demand plan at risk. So these are some units that were at risk of not being able to deliver. So what we want to do next is figure out why that is, what's causing these orders to potentially be late. And to do that, I am going to go back up to my task flow, and it looks like the next step in the process would be to look at the demand order analysis workbook. So I just click that. Oops. it opens up here. Just need to quickly adjust the scenarios that I'm looking at. So I'm going to take a look at the one I just created, the forecast adjustment, and apply that change. Okay, and then up here at the top, I can see an overview of my orders, specifically late orders. I can filter and take a look at which ones are actual orders versus forecast. In this case, they're all forecast orders, which is great because now I know that I have time to adjust potentially the supply for these orders before they become actual. And if I scroll over to the right here, I can see what parts it's for, the due dates versus the available dates, which you'll notice are all later than the due dates. I can see how many days late the order is. If I keep scrolling, we're going to get to the point that Dom made where not only does RapidResponse give us visibility into, how late it is, but it adds that transparency into what is the impact of this. So you can see that I've got my unit selling price in here, and based on the quantities of these orders, I'm realizing that I'm losing $11,000 on just this one order by not being able to supply it. So we want to see what's causing this delay and if we can fix it.
I just want to highlight that key part too, in that we talk a lot about the certainty and moving with confidence. So just having the ability to split between units and revenue, units and margin allows you not just to say, is this going to work or not, and kind of make that gut call. It brings it right down to the facts. Is this profitable? Is this the least expensive? Is this the most efficient way to do it? You're not going off of, a guess anymore on any angle of this plan. You know exactly what the ramifications are going to be in units, in customer service, and more importantly, in bottom line. It's incredibly powerful, all in one spot on the web, available for everybody to see. And how long did it take you? Like
seconds. Yeah. All right, so if I go ahead and just click on this icon, I'm going to open up that order, and then on the bottom half of my screen, I'm going to see some other information. So there we go. If I double click, the first thing that pops up is a supply chain network map. So just a really great visualization. Again, it loaded in seconds. I've got my finished good up here at the top. You can see who my customer is, what the due date is, how much they want, and then it breaks it down and says, okay, here's what it's made up of. And at the lowest level, we can see this one part down here with this tiny red dot. And what that means is that is our gating component, and that's what is causing things to be late. So from another view, I can also check out my component tree. So this is essentially an indented BOM here. And we've got our finished good up here at the top. Again, those beef ramen noodles. These ones are low sodium. And I can scroll down and see all the different components that go into it. And eventually I'm getting to that same component that we saw in the network map, E1512. So it looks like this disodium something is part of one of the additives that goes into the flavoring in the ramen noodles.
And that's just another big thing too. We talked about how quickly decisions can be made and actionable information. What I love about this interface is the visualization components and how it can work from many different languages. You can go back to the supply chain network map. At a glance, no matter what vision you're looking at, no matter how you consume information, everybody's on the same page. You're not building this from the ground up. You're not reconstructing bills of materials. With one click, you can see, boom, there's the issue, and then get to the components and see the details behind it. So that, again, removing guesswork, improving confidence, and moving quickly is really, like we said in the beginning, what supply chains are about and what you need to manage an agile supply chain. And this is giving it to you right out of the box. Really, really helpful.
Yeah, it really is a one-stop shop for planning. You've got all your different views in one spot. So if I go back to our component tree, again, this part is highlighted in this orangish red color to let me know that that's the one that's causing my finished good to be late. So I am going to take a look at this component, see what orders we have coming up, and see if there's anything we can do about it. to make it not late. So I'm just going to right click here, or not right click, just click, and immediately I can see a bunch of different drill down links where I might want to go take a look at this. So today I'm going to go into our planning sheet. Again, if I wasn't sure what to do next, I could absolutely go reference my task flow back up here. And I would see that the next step is to go to the planning sheet. All right, so this is a worksheet that's a pretty high level view of your different demand and supply elements. Just can easily drag and drop to adjust my screen here. So up at the top, we have a table view of our total demand and supply numbers, and then we can have a chart view in the middle, and finally on the bottom I can see some more detailed information. So I could take a look at my on-hand inventory for this part. I could look at my pegged allocations, my demand orders, but what I want to look at today is the supply orders. So this is a part that, or a component that we also, it's a PO. So if I scroll out to the right and take a look at the upcoming POs that we have, it looks like we've got 6 of them. And I can see when they're all due, so we have one for each of the next 6 months. And based on my status here, I can see that they're all open. So I can still adjust these if needed. They're not firm yet or anything like that. And so what I'm going to do next is try and potentially reschedule these to see if RapidResponse can give me a new due date that they recommend. And if we're able to do that, you know, perhaps we can get the supply of this component on time to fulfill our finished good orders for demand. So again, I'm in that forecast adjustment scenario. I'm going to go ahead and make a new one on top of that. I'll call this one reschedule. And the purpose of this is, again, so that I can go ahead and compare them all at the end and see which is the right path to take. So, hang on, let me just check one thing. Yeah, okay, all good. So I'm going to change the status of these. There's a bunch of different settings in RapidResponse, but I'm just going to edit this range and say, instead of having them be open, I want to keep them open, but have RapidResponse generate a new recommended date for me. So I'll apply that and just go ahead and save that change. And now I can see instantaneously I have new recommended due dates. So we can see that actually for these first couple of orders, we don't need the supply as soon as we originally thought, but then as we get down here into October and November, we're pushing up the due dates so that we can meet that additional demand that we entered in October through December. So I'm going to accept these recommendations and just go ahead and update my due dates based off of those.
So you could bring that in terms of a discussion to say which of these
Exactly.
options we do, you know, which recommendations did you want, and literally bring option A, B, and C to the meeting. And like Cam just did,
Yep.
say, all right, we'll go with C. Everybody goes with C.
Exactly. So I basically just copy and pasted those recommended dates to be my due dates now, and I'll save that again. And we're hoping this fixed our problem, but not too sure yet. So I'm going to walk us kind of backwards now in the same order. Go take a look at our demand order analysis again. In this case, I no longer want to look at the forecast adjustment scenario because I know I have a shortage there. I want to look at the reschedule one and see if that solved my issue. So just apply that one. And if I resize my screen here and go back to all of my orders, I see that there's no data found. So you can see there's a button up here. We're looking at late orders only. So if there's no data found, that's great news. We have no late orders anymore. Another way I can come and double check that is just go back to my consensus demand planning workbook. Go ahead and again, swap this scenario to my reschedule. And you can see instantly that demand planned at risk disappeared. So that's great news. So the last step I want to walk you through is evaluating all of these scenarios side by side and determining what the best option is. So the last part of our task flow was to evaluate the different plays via scorecard, which I've already got pulled up here. Just going to make a couple adjustments to add in the other scenarios. So I have my demand increase test, which again was the one that my sales colleague created. And then if I scroll down here, whoops, I can put in my forecast adjustment and my reschedule scenario. And we should be good to go there. Okay, so we can see that I just did some quick calculations. In these scorecards, I have different metrics that are important to our business. So the things that we're interested in looking at are ending inventory, our key constraint utilization, margin, revenue, and those sorts of things. So again, this demand increase test, my forecast adjustment where I put in the demand spike and then the reschedule, which also has the demand spike, but I rescheduled the component to make sure we can get everything on time. So now I see side by side all three scenarios. The first thing I want to point out is my key constraint utilization. So we can see that in my original scenario, it was only about 94%. That did go up. So we are, using more capacity on our key constraints to be able to generate these additional orders, but we're not over capacity. That's great. We can also see between the second and third scenarios, my on time to request dropped a bit and I had revenue at risk. So that was reflected, I think, by those like 1,600 units that we saw in the consensus demand plan workbook. Then once we reschedule them, that demand plan at risk disappeared. We're back to 100% on time to request order fulfillment. And then finally, we can see that our margin increased very slightly by 0.1% and our revenue went from 142 million to 146. So this is just a really great way to
bringing the objectivity to the decision-making process and removing that sort of tribal instinct, gut instinct, tribal knowledge to it by saying in very clear terms for what matters, how is this plan going to improve or not, right? And so you're taking a lot of that guesswork out and bringing that visibility that John and I mentioned earlier.
Yep. And so kind of to wrap things up, in my role as this planner, I can go ahead and share this in my existing collaboration. So I'm just actually, well, first I would want to share the those other scenarios that I created, but we can also do that. So it's just going to share this scorecard and I'll let the sales team know that by rescheduling components, we're able to meet existing and new orders on time. So I'll just go ahead and let them know that. They'll get a notification about it and we can proceed from there. If all parties are happy with it, I can come back to my scenarios over here and eventually promote these or commit them up to the parent scenario so that it becomes our operating plan. So that's where I'm going to wrap things up with a demo. Hope it was informative and just showed you the power of the concurrent planning and how it really gives you transparency into the activities you're performing on a daily basis.
And this is very typical. I mean, there's a million different ways you can slice and dice these scenarios, but I think demand change is one that's fairly common. We have two questions.
Okay.
You ready?
Yep.
Okay. So the first one was specifically was the recommended due date for the material considering the lead time constraint? So was that lead time offset included?
Yes, it was.
Yes.
Yeah. So that would that recommended due date that that it was providing would have considered any constraint that you've defined. So lead time, even capacity associated with the production of the ramen noodles on the line, that would have also been considered as part of that.
The other question we had was around how these changes flow back to ERP. So Dom, you mentioned some of the S&OE stuff. So Cam went through this whole exercise. We said, this is the one we're going to do. How does that actually become, how does the bill become a law kind of thing?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So that closed loop aspect of RapidResponse, so we've got connectors that are built into the platform to take the decisions that are being made. Once they're committed back to the live, like Cameron had mentioned, you can commit the scenario. Then on a process basis, so that could be every 15 minutes, every 5 minutes, however the customer decides they want that update to work, all of those actions then will go back and update the transactional system of record. So that could be one ERP, it could be multiple ERPs, depending on the nature of the environment.
So the next one is what, I have to bring the mic close to me. What is provided with RapidResponse to capture supply chain execution data to start the plan? Do you have a data warehouse or is it up to the customer to provide?
So we've got an operational data store, right? That's the database, if you will, that RapidResponse runs off of. So all of your master data and your transactional data have pre-built locations where we could store that. So by master data, I mean bill of materials, bill of distribution, product master, all of the settings like lead time and things like that. And operational data would be inventory, customer orders, scheduled receipts or purchase orders, purchase recs, work orders, all of that would be operational data. All of that has a home in RapidResponse, and that model can also be extended. So if there are additional reporting attributes that a certain customer needs, we can extend any of those views to include those as well. There are connectors built in for the common ERPs. So for instance, if you were connecting to SAP, either ECC or whatever version you wanted to, we could bring all of that in based on our connectors.
I think that's all the questions we had at the moment. Any other questions? Anything else that, Dom, you want to highlight from this or from the demo that usually are typical questions?
Yep, there were great job, Cameron, in walking through that demo. There were a couple of things I wanted to just call out if they weren't, obvious to the audience. The first one was when Cameron created that scenario and she made some changes to that scenario. You notice that it took less than a second to create that new scenario. Some of you might be thinking, well, that's probably just some demo data, so it isn't a lot of information to create that scenario. If you went to any of our customers, the biggest customer that we have at Kinaxis and said, go and create a scenario and I want to be able to model any change, it would take exactly that amount of time. And it's less than a second to create that replica of your entire end-to-end network. So it's fabulously powerful capability there, right? You can model any change you want, change anything that you want, and all of that gets done in a matter of seconds. The other aspect was at the end in that scorecard that Cameron was showing. That capability, being able to pull in any KPI, whether it be an operational KPI or a financial KPI, and weight them in order to calculate that score and look across multiple scenarios so you can do a compare and contrast. That, if you sort of put your mind back in the existing environment, like let's say you were trying to do that in Excel, that could be hours or days of effort, right? To be able to model scenario A versus scenario B, figure out the margin and the cost and the risk and all of that. And Cameron did it in a matter of a few minutes, right? Being able to create a scenario, test out something, and figure out what those scores are. So that it speaks to this slide that we've got up here. You know, you're taking processes that you might have done in hours or days or weeks in some cases, and you're boiling it down to minutes and you know, a few seconds in some cases to get that transparency. And that's really the game changer, right? When you're dealing with you know, in the COVID situation that we've all experienced over the last couple of years, you know, factories shutting down or social distancing rules saying that you have to run at half capacity, being able to run those scenarios in real time and change capacity, change calendars, and know what the answer is on a scorecard in a matter of a few minutes, that's game changing, as opposed to putting something in, running it in an overnight batch, and then tomorrow morning figuring out what the answer is, right? That's really what Mike was talking about in his introduction in terms of where the supply chain art is going.
Yeah. A couple other quick questions here. One, can RapidResponse bring in a sub-plan from suppliers and use it without replanning?
So if I understand the question correctly, you've got supplier commitments that you would be bringing in, and essentially that would be quantity and date commitments from your suppliers, so POs or maybe projected purchase orders, and you want to be able to just use that as your constraint and not plan anything over and above. Short answer to that is yes, if I've understood that question correctly.
So, another one, is there a customer and demand, so like sales order, forecast, quantity, prioritization in RapidResponse? So can you prioritize demand types or customer types in a constrained environment?
Absolutely. So you can prioritize down to the individual order level. So you can say order 1 gets a priority over order 2. That's the level of granularity you can get to. And that applies at a more abstracted level. So a Walmart order takes precedence over a mom and pop retailer order, for example.
Right. And finally, a comment from Tom says, as a user of Kinaxis for over 20 years, says RapidResponse is a game changer. They're currently deploying in the, I think, aerospace environment, and concurrent planning has changed their lives.
Fantastic. That's great to hear. And, you know, the change to your life is, you know, in some of these metrics that you're seeing on the screen, right? If you look at the fourth tile over, assessing a big order, you know, very common in a high parts type of environment, right? I get a drop in order. Being able to take something that might have taken you 14 days of work in Excel and figuring out the bill of material explosion and seeing all of the constraints through a complex bill of material, and now being able to do that in a couple of days or in a few hours, that truly is game changing. And you don't have to spend your weekends or late nights trying to do all of that. The system does all of that heavy lifting for you.
So one question on the platform itself, Virginia says this platform looks different than the one they're using at her company today. How do you upgrade it? I mean, we talked about the web. I know there's a Java client as well. You want to talk a little bit about the roadmap for the technology?
Sure. So about a year and a half ago, we released our web client interface. So we moved away from Java for that user persona. So the planner persona, if you will, it can now be done all within the web interface. There is still authoring, which is done through the Java, but that's also part of the roadmap where we will be moving that over to the web.
Is that a hard upgrade, or is that something that's automated, like automatically upgraded? Like, is that a project to do, or is it something that'll just get deployed?
So if you were to upgrade to any version of RapidResponse from, let's say, mid last year or so, you would have access to that full featured web interface.
Thanks. Cool. All right, we got 2 minutes left. If there's any last questions, I'll stall for a couple seconds here. But this was really great. Thanks for everybody's participation. You can tell there's a lot of energy in the supply chain space, specifically around these features. And we're very excited to be partnering and rolling this out to our clients. Thanks especially to Cam and Dom for providing the real content here. I think it was great to see it. It's one thing to see slides, but it's always better in person to see it live. Shows that it actually does work. One last question as we leave. Can you export this to a spreadsheet?
Yes.
Yes, always. Cool. Well, thanks everybody. Enjoy the rest of your week. We'll be emailing this out to share with your friends and loved ones, and we really do appreciate your participation, and we hope to talk to you soon. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.